Fire Emblem, am I right? Fire Emblem's been around for a long time, but it's definitely changed a lot since the olden days. Remember when Marth looked like this and just wasn't wearing any pants? Remember when the box art looked like this? You know, Fire Emblem Gaiden, featuring the main characters, Celica, Alm, and this guy? Nowadays, in modern civilized times, Fire Emblem has much more quality symbols, like borderline hentai and what is that, a fucking Danganronpa character? Who made this? But along with those other recent trends, a hallmark of modern Fire Emblem is the addition of avatar characters. Avatars were first introduced in Fire Emblem 12, New Mystery of the Emblem.
Where's Mark, William?
Oh yeah, I guess you should talk about Mark. Avatar characters were technically introduced in Fire Emblem 7, the first Fire Emblem game released in the US, but this guy, named Mark by default, barely even counts. He has no agency in the plot, and his only purpose is for the actual main characters to occasionally turn towards the screen and give you a tutorial or ask you something about the plot, kinda like a medieval fantasy anime version of Dora the Explorer. Cut Mark out of the plot and nothing really changes. Hell, cut Mark out of the game and nothing changes. He's not playable, he makes no meaningful decisions, he has no dialogue, he barely even has an appearance. So obviously the devs saw how pointless Mark was, because for the next 4 games, self-inserts were nowhere to be seen, until 2010 when Nintendo gave us Fire Emblem 12. Well, I say gave us FE12, but this game actually never came out in the West because of Shadow Dragon's poor sales. Who would have thought your average DS owner wouldn't want to play a remake of an old Japan-exclusive strategy RPG with the color palette of barrel-aged vomit? FE12 is a remake of the second half of Fire Emblem Mystery of the Emblem, the first half of which is a remake of Fire Emblem 1. I know. Confusing. Aside from updated graphics and modernized Fire Emblem gameplay, the main twist FE12 has over the original is the inclusion of this guy, named Chris by default, and a whole bunch of extra side story content surrounding him. As a prologue to the events of the main game, Chris joins the Altean Knights as a squire, along with all the other starter units from FE3, and through a series of contrivances ends up as Marth's right-hand man and best buddy. Chris basically exists to tell Marth how awesome and cool and sexy and brave he is all the time, and to be told in turn that Marth could never be so awesome and cool and sexy and brave without Chris's support. This game's intro cutscene makes sure to remind you that it's actually always been this way, and the only reason you don't hear about it in Fire Emblem 3 is because knowledge of Chris was lost to time. Yeah, you know Marth, legendary hero king? Well, he couldn't have done it without you, his most specialist, bestest friend. It's not like he used the sheer force of will and charisma to gather an army and retake his homeland. It's not like he had a loving and supportive wife, an army of knights willing to die for him, and trusted advisors to help him along the way. It's all you, sweet cheeks. I guess I technically have to congratulate the devs on flawless gameplay story integration, because Chris's perfection is demonstrated in gameplay by virtue of being extremely broken. You can customize his class and growth rates, making him the most min-maxed and optimized character in the game from the word go. Actually, from before the word go, because Chris has an entire 8-map prologue where the optimal and easiest thing to do is to power level him to ridiculous heights. And voila! Game solved. Chris is a really weird character. He doesn't actually affect the plot a whole lot because this game's plot already happened 15 years before on the Super Nintendo without him. As such, he really only takes an active role in the side content involving the new characters, most of which is fine, if not a little cheesy and underdeveloped. The whole idea of your self-insert being the best person ever, getting to be personal friends with the legendary hero king, and basically being his super supportive boyfriend because you're just that awesome, is kind of obnoxious to me. Hopefully this is something they'll improve on in entries after this one if they feel the need to bring back avatars. He's right behind me, isn't he? Robin! Back over here in the States, we were first introduced to avatars in Fire Emblem Awakening, the 13th game in the series, which thanks to FE12's poor sales was meant to be the series' swan song. Who would have thought your average DS owner wouldn't want to play a remake of an old Japan-exclusive strategy RPG with the color palette of barrel-aged vomit for a second time? Luckily for Intelligent Systems, Awakening was exactly the hit they were hoping for, and part of that is attributed to its heavier leaning on anime tropes than previous games, including having a self-insert. Since this game isn't a remake, it had full creative license to do whatever it wanted with the plot. So rather than being Marth's super special best friend, you now get to be Marth's great-great-great-great-great-grandson's even specialer and most bestest friend in the whole wide world. and even possibly his son-in-law, brother-in-law, niece-in-law, or you know what? Fuck it, even his wife and the mother of his children. This guy, or gal, named Robin by default, is even more customizable than Chris. There are tons more options for facial expressions, hair color, even height and voice. Along with the increase in customizability comes an increase in plot relevance, as while the story still mostly centers around Crom and his journey, Robin is much more of a deuteragonist than Chris ever was, actively participating in the story and making key decisions. Not that you actually get to make decisions. Sometimes the game will throw a text box or two at you, but regardless of what you pick, Robin or the game itself will make the same decision for you every single time. Yippee! Immersion! Speaking of choices, Awakening was the first game to introduce marriage between your characters as a mechanic. Fire Emblem Awakening and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. Most characters, including Crom, have a limited pool of potential suitors. But of course, because you're just so special and wonderful that everyone wants to have your babies, Robin doesn't have this restriction, meaning that alongside being the main character's bestie, you also get to choose which woman, or man, you'll have fawning over your sheer charisma. We've got redheads, shy soft uwu dancer, girl that might kill you, a furry,
Right to jail, right away.
legal dragon, Crom's girlfriend, Crom's daughter, Crom's sister, Crom's other mentally disabled sister, Jesus Christ, and Maribel. And to top it all off, you're also unquestionably the best unit in the game, hell, probably even in Fire Emblem history. Robin's growths are once again customizable, and his early join time and boosted experience gain make him comically broken, especially once you get a second seal and reclass him into a Dark Mage. Even if you decide to forego soloing the game with Robin and play the game regularly, he'll still most likely be your best combat unit and a broken support unit just by sticking to his base class. All of that being said though, I think as far as Fire Emblem avatars go, I actually kinda like Robin. Outside of the meta self-insert power fantasy stuff like marriage and his over-centralization of gameplay, in a purely plot sense, Robin is a pretty okay character. He's intelligent, capable, and a pretty stand-up guy. Crom and the others take a liking to him really quickly, but it doesn't feel overly contrived because he proves himself to be a reliable ally and an asset to their cause. In a way, Robin was a step in the right direction for avatars, as divorced from his status as a player character, I actually don't mind Robin in retrospect. On the other hand, however, Robin was a giant leap in the wrong direction, as he's an important milestone in the avatar's journey to becoming the center of the universe. In 2015, we finally got a Fire Emblem game without an awkward self-insert as a secondary protagonist. So that's it, that's the history of Fire Emblem's avatar problem. Thank you guys so much for watching. Here's that one purple chart about subscribing, and... Wait, why is the video less than halfway over? Hold on a second. And they made him the protagonist. Fire Emblem Fates introduces us to this prickly-eared, barefooted fuck named Corrin by default. Rather than being the main character's bestie, Intelligent Systems decided that you deserve the sole spotlight in this game. Corrin is a very special boy who is not only half dragon and inexplicably the chosen one, he's also royalty of 2 separate warring nations. At a young age, he was stolen away from his birth family in the peace-loving kingdom of Hoshido and brought to be raised as royalty in Nor, a harsh kingdom lacking in resources, known for its aggression. After learning this, Corrin is forced to choose who he'll side with in the constant conflict between the 2 kingdoms. Your comically evil dad that has tried to have you killed on multiple occasions just in the past 24 hours, killed your birth father right in front of you, and also literally just killed your mom. Or the country of exclusively nice people whose hobbies include peace, peacemaking, and being peaceful. Corrin has plenty of customization options, even more than Robin, but unfortunately 90% of them are horrifically ugly, because no matter what, you're stuck with red eyes and pointy ears. The female customization options are a little better, but back when I used to try to customize the avatars to look like me, he would usually just end up looking like Nosferatu. Like Awakening, Fates features marriage between your units as a prominent mechanic, but unlike in Awakening, it's not at all justified by the plot, and is shoehorned in with hilarious amounts of convenience because, well, the last game had it, we have to put it in this one too. Similarly to Robin, Corrin can marry anyone he wants, except of course his siblings, because that would just be weird. Okay, well, I guess even if it's kind of fucked up to marry someone you were raised with as a sibling, at least it's only the ones you know you aren't related to. Okay. Alright, well, thanks to this magic letter of plot contrivance given to your supposed blood siblings by your mother before she died, that they were instructed to open only if for some reason they ever got feelings for Corin, turns out you aren't related to them either. This is all so confusing and morally dubious. You know what? I'm just gonna marry the blue-haired girl on the cover. It seems like she and Corin have a lot in common, and at least they aren't related at all. Gameplay-wise, Corin is still extremely strong, but he doesn't completely solve the game like Robin did. That's Ryoma's job. Corin will be your best combat unit early game and usually remain a competent member of your squad all the way through to the end game. His unique ability to transform into a dragon also gives him flexibility between offense and defense, making him a really interesting part of your army. So in terms of gameplay, Corin actually gets my patented Soda Crab stamp of approval. Character-wise, on the other hand, oh my god, I cannot stand Corin. First of all, he's not wearing shoes. That doesn't really have anything to do with his character, but I do not like it. More than that though, he is incredibly whiny. Where other cooler protagonists might, nut up and put on a brave face as a leader, Corin whines and cries and shits and pisses his weird metal pants whenever something mildly unfortunate happens to anyone, ever. Compounding the whininess, he also has my absolute least favorite character trait for any protagonist ever. A complete moral aversion to killing, even when it's entirely justified, when it's for the greater good, or when some asshole just really deserves it. Even when the plot demands that someone needs to die, either the person in question kills themselves, or someone else will take the kill for Corin to keep his hands clean. Except Shura, for some reason, you can choose to execute this guy and take his shoes as a consumable item rather than recruiting him. I'm pretty sure this is the only choice in the entire game outside of the route split. To top it all off, not only is he absolutely insufferable, he's also just dumb as rocks. Just as a simple early game example, if you take the Revelations route and refuse to choose a side, Corin's genius idea for convincing his two families that he doesn't want to fight is immediately fighting both of his families. Isn't this awesome? So yeah, I'm not a fan of Corin. He's one of the major factors for why the plot of Fire Emblem Fates is one of the most entertaining dumpster fires of fiction that I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing. Mercifully, Fire Emblem would give us a brief respite from the Avatar pain train after this particularly painful stretch of track. I could easily make an entire video about why I love Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia. In fact, one day I probably will, but one thing that makes it stick out among modern Fire Emblem games is the distinct lack of a self-insert, instead opting for two protagonists whom I love very, very much. But unfortunately, this isn't a Shadows of Valentia video, so we'll have to move on for now. Jumping forward to console generation, we finally find ourselves on the Nintendo Switch with Fire Emblem Three Houses. Seemingly correcting at least a little bit from their mistake with Fates, the devs returned to having the Avatar as a secondary protagonist. Rather than hogging the spotlight to himself, this time he shares it with one of either Emperor Palpatine, undiagnosed schizophrenia, or Claude. Byleth, otherwise known as that one guy that made everyone really mad when he was announced for Smash Bros., is unique among the avatars that we've seen so far, in that aside from his name and gender, he is not at all customizable. Outside of having lines in combat and some other non-voice dialogue options you can choose from sometimes, Byleth is also an entirely silent protagonist. Therefore, it's a bit harder to hate Byleth than Corin because Byleth is intentionally very lacking in the character department. Byleth is a mercenary who, through a chance encounter with some students in the woods, ends up being picked as a teacher at an officer's academy. And a prestigious one at that, given that nobles and even the royalty of this world's three main factions are sent there. This is despite Byleth having absolutely zero qualifications to teach anything except maybe swordplay. Kind of strange how in the real world you need a degree to teach kindergarteners, but here in Fodlan all you need is connections and a robe/cape thing with weird sleeves to be qualified to teach college-age royalty. Granted, the person in charge of the school does have something to gain by keeping Byleth close, so it's not actually that contrived, but it's still kind of funny. In my head, I've always imagined Byleth being in way over his depth and having absolutely no idea what's going on as a professor, but all of his students are just too polite to call him out on it. Which of the titular 3 houses Byleth decides to teach determines which students he'll have for the first half of the game, and who he'll be siding with in the second half of the game. Byleth is a lot less obnoxious than other avatars so far because he's a mostly emotionless and silent protagonist both for self-insert purposes and for story purposes. The other characters still inexplicably love him and praise him for his miraculous talent of being a wise professor and mentor at age 20, but it still comes off as a lot less annoying than the avatar worship in previous games, at least to me. It also helps that the extremely cringy marriage thing was mostly done away with. Characters can grow close through supports, and at the end of the game, after the credits roll, characters can have paired endings, platonic or romantic, with whatever other character they ended up closest with. This is true for Byleth as well. This feels a lot more natural than the Awakening and Fates methods of having 2 characters get married after all of 4 conversations. In terms of gameplay, Byleth is good, but once again not as obnoxious as previous avatars. Almost every character in the game can be broken if you get them into the right build, Byleth included, but it's actually rather cumbersome getting Byleth there because of the way he interacts with Three Houses' class system. I won't get too deep into it, but he draws from an entirely different resource pool than students to allow him to use new weapons and change classes, meaning it can sometimes be a headache getting Byleth where you want him to be. To summarize, I have a lot less to say about Byleth in general by design. He's very inoffensive plot-wise, he's honestly more of a plot device than anything. However, I will say that when he does have agency, he can sometimes be incredibly based. I don't want to get too deep into spoilers, but some things that Byleth does or plays a part in would have Corrin shitting his pants. Byleth does, however, take away some of the spotlight from the real main characters, the leaders of the Three Houses. And honestly, I think the game would have been better off either without him or with a secondary protagonist that could meaningfully contribute to conversations. But at the end of the day, Byleth offends me a lot less than the previous 3 avatars. Okay, well, it got dark there for a while, with Corrin being the darkest hour, but you know what? We're moving on up. Oh, this is another segue about how it actually got worse when I thought it was getting better again, isn't it? That's weird though, I don't hear music like I did last time. Holy shit! Welcome to 2023, the current year. Oh shit, this took longer to make than I thought it would. Last year. Welcome to late stage Fire Emblem. Welcome to Fire Emblem Engage, and welcome to Alear. I should hate Alear. Look at this design. He looks absolutely ridiculous. And with the context you get from playing the game, this look is also hilariously on the nose. Alear, like Byleth, is not customizable outside of his name and gender. Unlike Byleth, however, Alear is not silent. In fact, he likes to talk quite a bit. But since he can't say his name, given that you can change it, he constantly walks around introducing himself as the Divine Dragon, a kind of nebulous title, given that until his mom dies in like chapter 3, she is also a Divine Dragon, but somehow not the Divine Dragon, despite the fact that she was queen of the Divine Dragons, a race of exactly 2 people, her and Alear, with her being the only one for the past 1,000 years because Alear was asleep. Confusing, I know. Even one of his crit quotes is just him announcing that he is the Divine Dragon to his enemy before he cleaves them in half with his super sparkly rainbow slash. Alear gives Three Houses the middle finger and goes to the Corrin school of being an avatar and also the sole main character. Alear takes it a step further though, because rather than just being the proverbial center of the universe and being inexplicably well liked by everyone for no real reason like Corrin, Alear is literally this world's god. People worship him. He has his own church. Just by existing, he commands respect and admiration from people. People kiss the ground he walks on. People bend over backwards to make Alear happy because he is the Divine Dragon. He is the center of the universe. He is Dragon Jesus. Alear's special power is summoning spirits called emblems. Basically just an excuse to bring old Fire Emblem characters back, except they're all blue and floaty and ethereal. He does this using special rings and really cringy on-the-nose incantations. In fact, Alear is particularly close with one of these emblem spirits. Can you guess who it is? That's right, we've come full circle, and Engage, not only do you get the whole spotlight to yourself for being super duper special, you're also so super duper special-tastic that you get to be super duper bestest friends forever with Marth, again, except this time, it's some nebulous spirit form of Marth that is the real Marth, but is also not the real Marth. I don't know. The emblems don't really make sense. Thankfully, in gameplay at least, Alear gets to step back a little bit from being the center of the universe. Like Corrin, rather than over-centralizing the game, he serves a unique role on the team. He gives his allies a damage boost just by being adjacent, and as long as he's in his base class, he provides the unique utility of getting more potent and flexible use out of whatever emblem he has equipped. You can also reclass him to make him a more capable combat unit stat-wise, but then you'd be foregoing his niche of using emblems to make the rest of your team better. This makes him important, irreplaceable even, but still healthy for the game as a whole. Congratulations, Alear, you get the second ever prestigious Soda Crab stamp of approval. In fact, take 2. As I said earlier, I really should hate Alear, but honestly, I cannot find myself to. I think it mostly comes down to Fire Emblem Engage itself being so painfully unsubtle and cringe in concept and execution that it loops back around to being hilarious and lovable. Alear is the poster boy of this concept. He is a microcosm of Engage as a game. From his stupid hair to the really dumb stuff that happens to him at the end of the game that I really want to spoil here, but I won't. It's all just so ridiculous that I can't help but smile. That being said though, being so bad it's good doesn't actually flip something's quality back around to being good. It kind of just sets your enjoyment level closer to where it would be if the thing in question was actually good. While I do think Alear is hilarious, I also think he's a shining example of everything wrong with Fire Emblem avatars. He himself is the poster boy of the Fire Emblem avatar problem. Chris, Robin, Corrin, Byleth, and Alear. What do they all have in common? Well, not once in this video have I opted to call them the Avatar rather than just their default names. They aren't true self-inserts. Corrin was never me. Regardless of what I named him and what I made him look like, Corrin has always just been Corrin, because Fire Emblem by design does not give the player any agency to make any difference with the avatar. Fire Emblem isn't some kind of immersive RPG where the player can actually influence the world and story through the choices they make as their character. Baldur's Gate, this is not. Fire Emblem is linear. Aside from the first hour of Fates or Three Houses where you basically are just picking which game you play, you aren't making any meaningful choices. The fact that you are in the game makes no difference. Robin makes the same choices and plays the same role in the plot during every single playthrough, regardless of your own thoughts or feelings. You aren't becoming a character in this story. You're just writing your name on one. Fire Emblem Avatar characters are held back in how they can be characterized because of this. Because the player's name is attached, they can't do anything morally objectionable. They can't stumble significantly in a way that isn't completely noble. They can't have any character traits that the player wouldn't find acceptable to see in themselves. The writing has to bend over backwards to make sure every character loves the Avatar. The only people that don't love the Avatar are framed as being wrong for thinking that way, if not just straight up evil. It completely kneecaps the writing and dooms avatars to be boring characters at best and actively terrible characters at worst. The worst part of this is that in retrospect, it's not even just us as a community using the avatar's default names as shorthand. Not even Fire Emblem as a series remembers these characters as avatars in their official appearances after the fact. Every avatar prior to Engage, aside from Chris, is in Engage as an emblem, and they aren't called Emblem Avatar, no, they're called Emblem Robin, Emblem Corrin, Emblem Byleth. In Smash, we have Robin, Corrin, and Byleth. In Fire Emblem Heroes, we have Chris, Robin, Corrin, Byleth, Alear. Hell, I haven't played the game since 2018, but I'm pretty sure they even added Mark. Now we have a bunch of characters that were boring and annoying because they were introduced as avatars, and thus are now permanently stuck being boring or annoying as their own standalone characters. Just look at Corrin. Anything she's in now, she has no real character outside of being nice and saying cryptic, non-specific things about fate and choice. She can't even reference actual events that happened in Fire Emblem Fates past Chapter 6, because the writers have to keep it vague which path she actually chose. Robin's whole deal these days is just being attached at the hip to Chrom. Chrom is in Robin's final Smash. Robin exists for Chrom. Forget his wife or his daughter, Chrom decides to spend the rest of eternity as roommates with Robin in some shitty bracelet. Byleth just makes vague references to teaching and learning, despite the fact that he was only a teacher for less than a calendar year. See what I mean? These characters are all absolutely neutered. If we could go back in time and just remove the whole self-insert aspect, just let these characters be Robin or Corrin in the same way that Marth or Ike are simply Marth and Ike. The writers could have done so many more unique or interesting things with these characters. They could have been fleshed out more, and their games would have been better off for it. This is especially baffling with avatars on the Switch. Byleth and Alear aren't even customizable. All you can do is name them and pick a gender. So this begs the question, why do they have to be self-inserts in the first place? This is obviously not me. It doesn't look like me, it doesn't sound like me, they don't make any decisions I would make, they don't have any of the life experiences I have. Why does this have to be my story? Why not just commit and pull the player out of the equation? Why can't we just experience Alear or Byleth's story the same way we experienced Alm and Celica's story? Shadows of Valentia has far and away the best presented story out of any modern Fire Emblem game, and a huge part of that is the complete lack of an avatar character. Alm and Celica have room to be actual characters and do things that we wouldn't. If I were in Celica's shoes, I sure as hell wouldn't have criticized Alm for leading the Deliverance. But Celica isn't me. She's a young, sheltered woman who has spent most of her life as a priestess in a monastery, not a grown-ass man writing 14-page video essays about inconsequential Fire Emblem characters. Imagine a world in which Alear was simply Alear, instead of having to be something for the audience to pretend is them. First of all, it would cut out all the awkward stuff referring to him as Divine One or the Divine Dragon, or just having his name in subtitles but not having it voiced. He'd be allowed to be a character in his own story. He'd be able to have traits that we might not like to see in ourselves. Developer interviews confirm that they originally wanted to make Alear more of a coward at first and have him actually take time to grow into his position as a brave leader. This could have actually been really interesting and fresh. We see their attempt at this in-game with his weird thing in Chapter 1 where he tells everyone to run away from the corrupted. But because of the fact that he never really shows cowardice or fear anywhere else in the game outside of occasionally saying the corrupted give him the heebie-jeebies, it doesn't really come off as cowardly. It feels more like he's suggesting a tactical retreat for everyone else's safety. Alear was absolutely neutered and robbed of any real character arc the moment you slapped your name on him. All of this is to say, I really hope intelligent systems will someday return to giving us fleshed out protagonists that don't feel the need to conform to the player. At this rate, remakes of Genealogy of the Holy War, Thracia 776, and Fire Emblem 6 are all looking pretty inevitable within the next few entries, and I'd really rather not have an awkward self-insert prancing around influencing the worlds of those games. Even beyond remakes though, hopefully the next original entry will finally be brave enough to dump the avatar and give us a protagonist that will forge their own legends like the Fire Emblem leads of old. Hey guys, thanks a lot for giving my video a watch. I'd really love to hear what you have to say on this topic, so please, if you've made it this far and have anything to contribute to the discussion, let me know in the comments down below. And of course, this wouldn't be a YouTube outro if I didn't shamelessly beg you to like and subscribe. But really, thanks again for stopping by. I really do appreciate every one of you for taking the time out of your day to watch my little passion projects, especially if you made it this far. With that, you all have a wonderful rest of your day or night, and I will see you all next time.